We are hearing two sermons entitled Bible's Bad Guys, a short series we started a few Sundays ago. Maybe this will continue for 5 more Sundays before we bring this series to its close. We're going through certain negative characters in the scriptures, trying to see why the scripture, why the Holy Word is not hiding the scars of some of its characters. The blemishes and the spots are honestly recorded in the Word of God, which means the Spirit of God has a message for us, even through the bad lives that are there in the scriptures. We so far looked at 7 such characters. We began with the life of Cain, then Esau, Achan, Absalom, Shimei, Jeroboam, and last week we looked into the life of Gehazi. And today is the 8th sermon in this series, Bible's Bad Guys. One of our neighboring states, few years ago, when they went for the election, the state assembly election, one of the contesting parties made their poll promise that they would offer free ride for ladies if they are voted into power. But that had its own limitations. Free ride for ladies only in the local town buses. So the free ride was limited to ride in local town buses, not in outstation services, not even between inter-district services, but only to the town buses that plies within your town. Well, they were voted into power and they fulfilled their promise. Months later, media went to see the pulse, the mood of the people, and the people's mood was this: yeah, but one thing we lack, they could have allowed us for a free ride in the interstate service and inter-district service also. Copying that, a couple of years ago, our state also made the same thing as a poll promise. If you vote us to power, we will also offer ladies free ride. But they extended the boundaries, not only in town buses, but also across the state. There are certain buses in which you can travel anywhere in the state, not just limited to the town buses. So they just extended the boundaries. They were voted in power. And they fulfilled their promise. Ladies can travel not only in town bus, but also within the state, anywhere, but in certain classes of buses. Few months later, the media once again want to know the pulse of the people. And here is the mood of the people. They could have also allowed us in the AC buses. Grants of government has never made the citizens happy for a long time, because we are quick enough to hold on to one thing we don't have. The 8th character in the line of the bad guys, HAMAN, the man who counted the one thing he never had. HAMAN, the man who counted the one thing he never had. He is the 8th in line in our series of meditating upon Bible's bad guys. Do you know that in the 10 chapters of the book of Esther in the Holy Bible, the name HAMAN occurs 45 times? And that too, in the first 2 chapters, the name doesn't even occur. The name for the first time appears in the 3rd chapter of Esther, and the book has only 10 chapters in it, which means in the rest of the 8 chapters, the name HAMAN occurs 45 times. That tells us he is not an ordinary character to the book of Esther. He is very important. 8 chapters, 45 times the name appears. A man who counted the one thing he never had. I have 5 headings to go through as we pay attention to the life of Haman. And then I will make some observations and life applications from this life as we conclude the sermon this morning. But here are the 5 headings. Number 1, Haman's story. Number 2, Haman's fury. Number 3, Haman's worry. Number 4, Haman's hurry. Number 5, Haman buried. That's easy, right? Haman's story, Haman's fury, Haman's worry, Haman's hurry, and Haman buried. Those are the 5 headings we will look at as we go through the life of Haman. A man whose name appears 10 times in this 8 chapters, starting from chapter 3. Let's begin with Haman's story. The beginning of this man's life as it is introduced in the book of Esther, in the 3rd chapter of the book of Esther. Turn in your Bibles to Esther chapter 3. Esther chapter 3. Those of you who probably are not very familiar to the Bible, if you can find the book Psalms in the Old Testament, right before the book of Psalm, you have the book of Job, and before the book of Job, you will find the little book of Esther. Take your time. There is no shame in finding where the book of the Bible is. That's okay. And if you have a digital Bible, it will actually make ignorance a blessing. You'll find it for you. Okay? So, but if you have the hard copy, then you have to find where it is. It is Psalms, before Psalms, Job, and before Job, you will find the book of Esther. A short introduction to this book. God's people, the Jewish people who lived in the land of Israel, ended up disobeying the commands of God. Therefore, as a matter of punishment to his people, God sent enemies to destroy the land of Israel over 3 times in history. First, in the year 605 BC, the Babylonian army first invaded Israel and destroyed part of the nation and carried many Jewish people as captives to Babylon. Then second time, again in the year 597 BC, the same Babylonian army once again invaded the southern kingdom of Israel, Jerusalem, Judah, and they carried again some people as captives to Babylon. Third time again, the same Babylonian army invaded, attacked the nation of Israel in the year 586 BC, and this time they thoroughly destroyed the city. They destroyed the buildings, they burnt the Jerusalem temple, the city went on in smoke. That prophet Jeremiah wrote the book of Lamentation as he looked at the smoke that was rising up from Jerusalem, that Nebuchadnezzar thoroughly destroyed it. That these destructions came as judgment from God towards a disobedient people. They went to Babylon, stayed there for 70 years, and meanwhile, the government in Babylon got changed. In the year 539 BC, over one night, the Medo-Persian army defeated Babylonia, and the great Babylonian empire fell. The Medo-Persian empire started. As the Persians started their kingdom, they became very soft-cornered towards the Jewish people. They began to behave very good towards the Jewish people. One of the goodwills they showed towards the Jewish people was they allowed the Jewish people to return to their homeland. From Babylon, now the Persian country, they allowed the Jewish people to get back to their home country, which is the land of Judah, Jerusalem. So over 3 times, people returned. Few people stayed back in Persia. That's the context of the book of Esther. The chapter 1 begins that King Ahasuerus gave a grand party, and a matter of showing his the grandeur of his kingdom that extended from Ethiopia to India. India's name is mentioned in the Bible in the book of Esther, and his empire extended even up to India, 127 provinces. And on the last day of the great banquet, to show his power, he wanted Queen Vashti to come and walk before all the great guests. That was a cultural practice, because haram in the ancient Near Eastern culture is not simply a place where you keep your women, wife, and concubines. Haram is actually the symbol of the power of a king. And that's the reason when King David was escaping from Jerusalem, when Absalom rebelled, David made sure 10 of his concubines are left in the harem. That is telling us David is not letting the control over palace to go. He wants to show the palace is still under his control. 10 of his women are still in the harem. It's not a place like we commonly think, or a place where women are kept. No, it's the symbol of power for them. Vashti, for some reason, turned down the request. The ego of Ahasuerus went up, that a lady put him to shame before 127 kings. He immediately removes her from the queenship. The recruitment for the next queen happened. Esther became the queen of the kingdom of Persia, a Jewish woman. Her uncle, Mordecai, was already a gatekeeper in the palace of Ahasuerus, who was also a Jewish man. In the 3rd chapter of the book of Esther, this man, HAMAN, was introduced. But his story is introduced against a background that is worth noticing. That's what I want to point to you. In chapter 3 of Esther, it says, chapter 3, verse 1, after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman the Agagite. So when you read in the Bible, after these things, what's the question you have to ask? After what things? Right? After what things? Well, you have the detail right in the preceding paragraph. That is in the last paragraph of chapter 2 of Esther. Let's read from verse 19 of chapter 2 of Esther. Now when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her kindred or her people as Mordecai has commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting in the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs, who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther. And Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows. And it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles, in the presence of the king. Very interestingly, Haman's promotion, Haman's story was introduced in the Bible against the background of the story of whom? Mordecai. Mordecai sensed a plot that is going on within the palace of Persia to assassinate the Persian king Ahasuerus. He somehow sniffed it, and he put that word to Esther. Esther informed that plot to whom? Ahasuerus. And as Esther informed the plot to Ahasuerus, Bible says she informed it in the name of whom? Mordecai. That is to be noted. Esther did not hide the fact from whom did she receive this very important information. She informed it in the name of Mordecai to King Ahasuerus. And the thing that Mordecai did was recorded in the history book of the palace. Chapter 3 verse 1 says, after these things, who should have been promoted? Mordecai, who was promoted. Haman. Question: from where did Haman enter into the scene? No one knows. No one has an idea. His entry into the scene is a mystery. By all means, in the 3rd chapter, any logically thinking person will expect the name of whom? Mordecai. Esther reported in the name of Mordecai. Common sense will tell us if there is one person who ought to be elevated, that must be one Mordecai. And chapter 3 verse 1 strikingly says, after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman the Agagite. Why? What led King Ahasuerus to take his eyes off Mordecai? A man who has been introduced already in chapter 1 onwards. Suddenly a strange name, Haman. From where did he come from? What was he doing here in this palace up until now? No one knows. But suddenly he was promoted. One of the characteristics of the book of Esther is, the book of Esther in its very nature tend to hide things. That's the nature of the book. For example, the name of God is never mentioned in the book of Esther. That's one of the reasons why under the canon of the scripture for a long time people thought whether to include the book of Esther in the canon of the Bible or not, because how can we include a book in which the name of God is not even appearing once, was the struggle. The name of God is hidden in this book, but the hands of God are very evident. This book in its very nature tend to hide certain things. Certain things are very mysterious. But through the mystery and the hidden aspects, something glowing will emerge. One can sit and assume several things as to why King Ahasuerus promoted Haman. At point when I think, oh, this Mordecai deserves promotion, in the very next chapter, I would like to read about this man. Suddenly Mordecai disappears and a stranger's name appears. Haman was promoted. The text of God's word places the promotion of this stranger against the background of the good deeds of Mordecai. But the good deeds of Mordecai only hid him further. And here is the evil man ascending. After these things. How long was that after these things? I don't know. Looks like Haman by nature was a man who was able to manipulate, who was able to take something that someone else have done and use it for his own ends. I've heard that. Probably things are different today, I don't know. I heard that in the film industry, many would come to the front line by manipulating their way and using a song or a story that someone else created. That you are master in manipulating, you somehow take that story, take that song and present it as if you wrote the story, you wrote the song, and finally the world will remember you. In fact, someone else wrote these lyrics. It was someone else's story. It's a field where so many people live with such kind of a disappointment because the ones who really wrote are never in the front line, and many people come to the front line even by using others. Things could have been different now. Did Haman do something like that? That over a period of time, it was because of his proximity to Ahasuerus that he promoted himself as the man who was even behind the plot that was revealed. Some manipulation, some ugly strategy that he played, Ahasuerus promoted him. Where is Mordecai? Right there in the gate. life sometimes isn't fair. Those who are sincere, like Mordecai, don't get promoted. And those who can manipulate through ugly, evil strategies are promoted. Those who really do the job, the king's eyes are not falling on him. The lazy fellow, the crooked, the wicked, on him the eyes of king falls. And we wonder, why, Lord, why? Many times life seems to be like that. And you probably are going through one such right now in your workplace, wherever it may be. What do we do during such times? Well, don't fight the world's way. Just be at the king's gate until the Lord works. That's all Mordecai did. He just stayed at the king's gate until the Lord worked. Don't fight the world's way to get it done. Don't fight the world's way to get things in your hands. Yet, many things in life is not fair. We sit and say, he don't deserve. She don't deserve. We sit and say, where is the reward of my hard work, my sincerity? No one pays attention. When we are all in the hostel, in the mornings you have common duties. Common duty means you're cleaning your compound and cleaning the toilets and doing all the menial work in the compound. 45 minutes of morning duty for all. But then there are some smart fellows always in the hostel campus. They will never make their hands dirty. They will be always there finding some excuse to escape from the duty. And then here are some sincere fellows putting their hands onto the ground, making their hands dirty, working sincerely. But in their sincere work, because they are focused on the work, they don't see the principal walking in the campus. So without even aware of principal is walking, they sometimes want to take a break and stand up and appear as if they are not doing the work. And those smart fellows, they are always standing there to watch whether the principal is coming or not. So the moment they see the principal, they make their hands dirty. They do all things. And sometimes the disappointing thing is the principal will say, good job, guys. I just took a break. I was working here sincerely. He's a crook. But the good job, guys, goes to him. Haman was that. Good job, guy. And Mordecai is not there. Are you in one such situation? Are you battling through a moment like that? What can you do? Don't fight the world's way. Just be at the gate until the Lord works. My point is this. Haman's story is introduced in the book of Esther. Although he is a man who never loses anything, he is a winner every time. That's the way the story begins. The story is beginning with giving us a note that he will not lose anything. He is a winner. If you can manipulate your way to be on the right side of the king in his courtroom, the king gives a special edict that everyone must bow down before Haman. That was an edict that king of Persia gave. If you can be that smart, you cannot fail. That's how the story begins. But in God's kingdom, the beginning of the story doesn't guarantee its end. In God's kingdom, the beginning of the story does not guarantee its end. The story can go in any direction. It looks like Haman is in charge. It looks like he will win. That's the beginning of the story. Number 2, Haman's fury. Look at chapter 3 of Esther. Chapter 3 of Esther, reading from verse 2 onwards. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" And when they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, here comes the word, Haman was filled with what? Fury. Haman was filled with fury. The Hebrew word that is translated fury there is a word that the translators must have struggled to find the appropriate English equivalent. Because the word there cannot be translated as anger. The word cannot be translated as wrath. So they thought maybe the term fury will do justice. But when the translators came to the 5th chapter, dealing with the same Hebrew word, there they translated that as wrath. So that should tell us how much the translators struggled with this word, trying to find the equivalent. The word has the idea of boiling anger that will 100% damage an object. This is the same Hebrew word used in Daniel chapter 3, where Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury. The 3 guys are not bowing down. And that fury means guaranteed danger. The fire thrown into the furnace. This is not anger or intense anger or wrath. This is boiling anger that will overflow and fall on the objects and burn the objects. He was filled with fury. Why? Because one man is not respecting him. Now, the scripture is not saying that Mordecai was not respecting the person, but the scripture says he did not bow down and pay homage to the person, because in the ancient Near Eastern context, in the Persian culture, to bow down before a person to the earth means you are acknowledging the person as divine. Because the concept of rulers being divine is so prominent in the ancient Near Eastern culture. To bow down to the earth before a person is also to acknowledge the person is divine. And the Jewish theology, right at the first commandment of the 10 commandments, prohibits that you cannot bow down before anyone as objects that deserve worship or some sort of a divine. So Mordecai would have refused to bow down because he don't want to acknowledge Haman to the point that he is God himself. He was a divine person. There is another chance that Mordecai did not bow down before Haman because Mordecai knew well he is an evil person. This is something that we lack today. I can say that for sure with me. We do lack the quality of what we call an anger towards something evil. We sometimes lack that. And that's one thing that we have to learn from social activists and people who write against evil in the society. One thing I appreciate them when I read them in the newspaper or anything is there is a good sense of anger in those people. There's a wonderful sense of anger. I think that anger is approved by God. We can't write them off saying, oh, they are social activists. No, they are social activists. But the anger, the upset that they have is right. It is good in the sight of God. And sometimes we don't have that. We tend to be hypocrites with it. We know that the person is evil, but then we do all things outside to just get the favor of the evil person. This is a good anger. that Haman, knowing that he is an evil man, he don't want to bow down before him. We call that as a holy courage in the public platform. If you are evil, then I cannot smile at you. You are evil. That's it. I won't fight with you. I'm waiting for God's time. But that doesn't mean I can smile with you at every time and bow down before you. You are evil. But that one thing upsetted our man, Haman. He was full of fury. Haman's fury has nothing to do with justice and righteousness. His fury has to do with his own ego. He was angry because his ego was attacked. And brothers and sisters, is that not true with us many times? Many times our upset with something or someone has nothing to do with justice and rightness. It has to do with my ego is attacked. Therefore, I have to react. The anger has no godly justification. That we are simply upset, we are simply angry because my ego is attacked. Haman's fury has no justification at all. The only justification was his ego was attacked. From there, the story moves to Haman's worry in the 5th chapter of the book of Esther. Between chapter 3 and chapter 5 is the 4th chapter of the book of Esther, where Mordecai sends a word to Esther saying, Esther, the wicked Haman has come up with an evil plot. He is already an evil man, and the evil man can only think evil ways. Haman has taught his evil ways. He has used his power, his position, his proximity with the king of Persia to get his evil plan approved. The calendar is marked. The date is marked on such and such day. The kingdom of Persia is gearing up for a genocide that will be sponsored by the government of Persia, and Haman will oversee this genocidal effect. All the Jews will be executed on this particular date. Haman got the stamp of the king on the paper. Plan is in place. Mordecai sends the word to Esther saying, maybe it is for such a time like this, Esther, God brought you into this palace. Let us look unto the Lord. Fasting was proclaimed, and Esther got into the palace of Ahasuerus. If the king doesn't raise his golden scepter, the queen's life is at stake. But Esther risked it, saying, if I die, I die. She walked into the court. Ahasuerus lifted up the golden scepter and asked Esther, what do you want? And Esther marvelously placed a request before the king. I just want you and Haman alone to come for the banquet I am preparing over the next 2 days. That is chapter 5. Only king and Haman are invited for the Esther's banquet, the queen's banquet. Haman goes for the first day, attends the queen's banquet. No one else is there. King, queen, and the third person there was Haman. Ego has now touched to sky level. Chapter 5, verse 9. And Haman went out that day joyful and glad of heart. Oh, if you were there, you would have experienced the same thing too. Because the queen's request was, O king, only you and Haman are invited. Haman had his stomach full, walks out of the banquet hall. His heart was rejoicing. Oh, he was glad. Verse 9. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he neither rose nor trembled before him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. The same word, the same Hebrew word, fury. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. And he sent and brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. And Haman recounted to them the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, all the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and the servants of the king. Then Haman said, even Queen Esther, let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared. And tomorrow also I am invited by her together with the king. Yet all this is worth nothing to me, as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Free pass in the town bus ride. Free pass even in the inter-district buses. But the AC bus is not allowed. It was Haman. He attends the banquets, come home. He calls his wife and his friends and tells them, narrates to them. If you read that verse, 5 blessings, he just lists one after the other. A list of 5 blessings that he tells, but he was not listing those blessings to acknowledge God. He was listing those blessings to exalt himself. And the climax of the blessing is used by the little word even in chapter 5, verse 12. That's the climax of the blessing. Even Queen has invited only me and the king. Even the queen of this Persia has invited only me and the king to come for the banquet. That's the climax of the blessing. But church, it is so sad. That but moved to even, and sadly is ending up with a yet, Y-E-T, the 13th verse. Yet all these things worth nothing, as long as I see that fellow at the gates. Even Queen invited me, yet I am not happy. My heart is full of worry. I want to do something to this fellow. Interestingly, here in this passage in chapter 5, Haman, having listed 5 blessings in his life, quickly went on, negating all the blessings with one word, which has only 3 letters in the English Bible, Y-E-T. With that one word, all 5 blessings have been nullified and negated. Yet all these things worth nothing to me, as long as that one fellow is before my eyes. Ironically, the passage begins by saying, Haman went out from the banquet hall joyful and glad. Oh, brothers and sisters, how sad it is that the joy and the gladness that only comes through human partying, the wonderful things that the world has to offer, does not last for a long time if our heart is not right. He came out of the banquet hall just rejoicing and glad. What happened to that Haman? One Y-E-T negated all things. There's something wrong with the heart. There was nothing wrong with the banquet. All food were of top quality. But the heart is not right. The heart is bad. The heart is wicked. All blessings worth nothing to him because he didn't get the one thing he craved for. It almost parallels to the story of Ahab in 1 Kings chapter 21. All the palace, all the power, the position, the properties worth nothing as long as I see that poor fellows, that Naboth's vineyard right next to me. I want that vineyard. Ahab, you have the palace. Ahab, you have the power. Ahab, you have all these properties. Yeah, but worth nothing. I want that one more. One more of Naboth's vineyard. He was asking at the cost of his own blood. He enters. Welcome. Wicked Queen Jezebel, the wife of Ahab, had a suggestion for her. Eliminate him. You have power. Use power. Eliminate that fellow Naboth. Get his vineyard. He got it and then paid with his own life. Here, welcome. Enters Zeresh, the wife of HAMAN. She gives the idea. HAMAN, you have power. Eliminate Mordecai. Every attempt that you and I make in our own common sense and thoughts and power to retain joy and gladness, the divine hand will frustrate. It will. In the smart mind of Zeresh, the calculation was, if Mordecai himself was not there, my husband will be happy and glad. The divine mathematics is heading in a different way. When our heart is filled with anger and bitterness, it is very important from whom we take counsel and advice. Because when our heart is controlled by anger and bitterness, common sense doesn't work naturally. Because anger and bitterness has the power to suppress common sense, to suppress logic. It doesn't allow those things to work. Therefore, when we go through times like that, it is very important whom we surround ourselves with. Sadly, in the 5th chapter of Esther, Haman, when his heart was controlled by anger and bitterness, he surrounded himself also with wicked companionship. All his friends and his own wife were only stamping and showing their approval on his loss of common sense. If alone he had a godly advice, things could have been different. And we do the same thing too. When our hearts are full of bitterness and anger towards something or upset about some person, we also surround ourselves with people who would not confront us but concede with us. If alone Haman had someone to confront him, Haman, what do you think? Stop that. He surrounded himself with people who would concede with him. Haman's worry has to do with his own pride and image. That worry caused him to nullify all his blessings as his heart pondered on one thing he couldn't have in life. The anger is now rooted in bitterness. And bitterness is now producing the fruit called wicked deeds. All blessings are nullified as the heart is bent on one thing that you still don't have. It's a heart that is bent on one thing that he is not able to have. The anger to bitterness to wicked deed. All blessings are nullified. From Ori, the passage now goes to Haman's hurry. The next thing is speed up by all means to do what you have to do. And notice the speed in which the text is moving. Look at verse 14. Then his wife, chapter 5, verse 14. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. This idea pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made. I really like the way the Hebrew text kind of uses commas and ands and say, it's done, over. But it's not as easy as you read in the text. To make a gallows is not very easy job. Notice the particle. Then. And. He had the gallows made. Haman, didn't you take 1 minute to think about that? No! Would you like to go over the decision? No! That night, the gallows are made. There's no room to think. There is no room to go back over the decision. This pleases my heart. The workers have entered the palace courtyard. The workers have entered his house. And on that night, as Haman went to his bed, he went to the bed thinking, the noise of the workers working on that 75 feet high gallows will restore the joy and the gladness forever in his life. What a peaceful sleep. Haman's hurry was a hurry that doesn't suit into your common sense. Because there is no common sense in the hurry at all. Simply not there. That night, a 75-foot tall gallows. Imagine with me, as Haman had that sleep that night, he wakes up in the morning and he knew the workers are almost finishing their task. A call comes from the palace. Haman, king is calling you. The problem with our hurry is that God takes little or no time to block the road and halt our journey or turn us around. The problem with our hurry is that God takes little or no time to block the road or turn us around. It is very interesting. The night that Haman calculated will retain his joy and gladness forever is the same night heaven began to destroy it. As God entered the bedroom of the Persian king. In my notes, I kind of rhymingly wrote this. However, that very night, the invisible hands of God began to work through the insomnia of the Persian king. That very night, the invisible hands of God began to work through the insomnia of the Persian king. The king wasn't able to sleep. When Haman was sleeping, thinking this gallows will put it all to an end, king couldn't sleep. God turned the tables around that night. When Haman's workers were about to finish the gallows in the morning, he also received a call from the palace. Unaware of the events that happened that night, Haman entered the presence of the king, simply to face the question, "Oh Haman, my friend, what do you think the king have to do to the one whom he honors?" Yesterday's banquet is still in your mind. The even is still in your mind. Even the queen invited only me along with the king to attend the banquet. Haman was right in guessing that he is going to be the man. The Hebrew narration, it is beautiful again. In chapter 5, he narrates 5 blessings. In chapter 6, he tells the king 6 best things the king have to do for that person. It's almost like my list always have to improve. Yesterday it was 5 things he was boasting to his own wife and friends. Today he is telling the six things to do. Let's read that. Chapter 6. Reading from verse 5 onwards. And the king's young man told him, Haman is there standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? And Haman said to himself, who would the king delight to honor more than me? And Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown is set, and let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and let them lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Oh boy, smart mind. Yesterday was 5, today is 6. There will be a total of 11 things. The place, the same word hurry, now is reversed. You will read the word hurry. Verse 10. And the king said to Haman, what? Hurry! Do it for whom? Mordecai. God has a sense of humor when he blocks your road and my road. Sometimes he blocks it and he smiles. All our smartness. Yesterday this fellow was hurrying. Today the king is in a hurry and you are in trouble. Do it to Mordecai. I love it again, church. The writer of the story is playing with words. He now uses the word hurry along with Haman. Look at verse 12. Then Mordecai returned to the king's palace gate, but Haman hurried to his house with his head covered. Like the writer is telling us, laugh guys, smile at what is going on here. God is turning the tables around. Now Haman is hurrying. Every time he hurries towards the throne. This time he is hurrying towards the house. And his face is what? Covered actually. Covered with shame. Covered with shame. Yesterday, Haman was in a hurry to retain his joy and gladness. And today, the king was in a hurry to spoil Haman's joy and gladness. But God wasn't in a hurry. He is patiently working what he is supposed to do. That's it. God has never been in a hurry. Yesterday, Haman was in a hurry to somehow secure his joy and gladness by eliminating Mordecai. Today, the king is in a hurry to spoil what you are running after. Heaven has never been in a hurry. God is at work. That's it. Brothers and sisters, one of the things that we can learn from the life of Haman is this, that you and I always have to keep in mind, there is more to life than what your plain eyes can watch and see. There is more to life than what your eyes can right now watch or see. Haman's every meticulous calculation was based on what his eyes were seeing. But what he failed to notice was, heaven is at work. He couldn't see that. He missed how God stormed into the bedroom of Ahasuerus. He totally missed it. Very often we go with what we see with our eyes. And sometimes we get overexcited because of what we see with our eyes. Other times we go into a sense of depression because of what we see with our eyes. And it takes the heavenly wisdom and the help of the Spirit to see that there is more to life than we are not able to see. And if that hands move, if those feet moves, stories could be different. The gallows may be satisfying, but when God enters the palace of the king of Persia in the night, who can stop him? You simply can't. The horse is prepared for the battle, but victory comes from whom? God. Says Proverbs 21:31. You may prepare your examination. You may prepare your horse to the best of your ability. That it is only lazy people who would say, I will not prepare my horse. If you are in the military, you have to prepare your horse in those days. If you are in the military, keep your guns all set and right. But the trust is not on the guns. The trust is not on the horse. The victory must come from the Lord. Haman trusted his horses, but the victory entered through other doors, favoring Mordecai. Haman's hurry was a hurry that was fully trusting in himself. A hurry that was only based on what he could see with his plain eyes. But what Haman was not able to do was, he was not smart enough to outsmart God himself. God ran ahead of him. Even before he entered the palace of Ahasuerus, in the middle of the night, God entered there. He lost the race. Young people, the hurriedness that you show to climb up the ladder in your life, it is good to work hard with your education. It is good to plan for your life. It is good to do well in your exams and education. All those things are great and fine. We ought to. But if you think that through your smartness in education, through those numbers on the report cards and everything, you can smartly handle your life, if God runs ahead of you, you are in trouble. The point of the story is the gallows work happened the same night when God caused insomnia for Ahasuerus, both at the same night. But God won. And the story began. It was almost like you are facing an invincible person. It's almost like he will win every time. The story is now moving from a kind of an invincible person, how quickly this hurried person got buried. One last time the word hurry will come in his story. That's the death bell. Chapter 6, verse 14. That's the last time the word hurry will appear in the English Bible, the book of Esther. While they were yet talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried him to bring Haman to the feast that Esther has prepared. This time Haman is not in a hurry. That's the humor of the story. Because he's already a disappointed fellow. He just returned home after doing all those things for Mordecai. Telling his wife and his friends, you know what happened this morning. I don't really want to share. It's better for me to go and hang in this. It's better for me. Not knowing that he will be hanged there. But right now it is better for me to be hanged there than doing that for that fellow. And his wife Zeresh, who was smart enough to give him that advice yesterday, now told him, if before Mordecai this has started, your fall is sealed. She goes on a back foot. While they were talking, the king's servants came. Hurry, Haman, Esther's second banquet is ready. This was the hurry towards his graveyard. This was the hurry that will end in his own graveyard. One last time, the hurriedness. Hurry, the banquet is ready. And this time I don't know, no joy, no gladness. But when sat there, I don't know what he ate that day. But King asked Esther the same question that he asked yesterday also. What do you want, Esther? Even if you ask half the kingdom, I will give you. Esther grabbed the chance. Me and my people are in trouble. Who did that, Esther? None other than this wicked Haman. The coffin had its last nail. Done. Over. Chapter 7, verse 6. And Esther said, a foe and enemy, this wicked Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. And the king arose in his wrath from the wine drinking and went into the palace garden. But Haman stayed to beg for his life from Queen Esther, for he saw that harm was determined against him by the king. And the king returned from the palace garden to the palace where they were drinking wine, as Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. And the king said, will he even assault the queen in my presence in my house? As the word left the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. That was officially his burial. Haman had no intention to violate the king or queen at all. But the posture on the couch looked like, for King Ahasuerus, he is actually violating the queen. The moment the servants knew the king is taking his offense against the queen, they covered his face. That was his burial. Sealed. The day that Haman anticipated finally arrived, but in a shameful context. Even Queen Esther never planned what happened in the palace last night. She only planned yesterday's banquet and today's banquet. What happened in between, even Queen Esther never planned. The king's servants hurried Haman for the banquet. And the hurried Haman was soon buried by the king's servants. Chapter 5, verse 13. Yet all these things worth nothing, as long as I see Mordecai, the Jew, sitting at the king's gate. Brothers and sisters, Haman's problem was not Mordecai. Haman's problem was his own heart. And he kept on missing that. He kept on missing that. The thought of bitterness that eliminates gratitude and joy from life. Haman enjoyed all the privileges one could wish in life. He just came out of Esther's banquet. He came home and narrated at least 5 blessings that once he enjoyed in his life. But with that one Y-E-T, he negated it all. He had everything, but he enjoyed nothing. He was content with nothing because he was craving for one thing he couldn't have. There is a bit of Haman in all of us, church. Often we grumble against God. We show ingratitude to God. We fail to enjoy life because of that one person we don't like, or that one blessing that God has not given us, or that one failure that God has allowed in our life, or that one desire or prayer that God is denying. We lose all sense of gratitude towards God, and we show the same Haman spirit. Yet all these things worth nothing until I get that. May we not dare to point our fingers at Haman, because there is a bit of Haman in you, in me, doing the same thing. Therefore, the writer to the Hebrews warns us in the book of Hebrews chapter 12, let no bitterness springs up and causes trouble. By it many have been defiled. The one little yet in chapter 5 verse 13 of Esther ruined all things in Haman's life. The question for you and I is this, brothers and sisters. What is that one yet standing between you and God? What is that one Y-E-T standing between you and God? You are not enjoying your life with contentment because you are allowing that one thing to occupy your mind. Eliminate it, you can be free. But you are not able to eliminate that thought. Count your blessings, and you will find enough reasons to be joyful and content. Is there a yet in your life that is making you unhappy? Your marriage unhappy, your work unhappy, your attitude towards children unhappy, towards your spouse so unhappy, towards the church so unhappy? That one yet, you are missing the many. You are missing the many. Sometimes we don't count the blessings God gives in our lives because God places those blessings in the midst of so many mess around us. And because God places those blessings in the midst of so many messy things around us, we pay so much of attention to the mess and miss the blessings. There's a beautiful verse in Proverbs 14:4 that says, where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but abundant crops come through the strength of the oxen. I grew up in a village context, in a rural context, where my dad was in the ministry. And in those days when we used to go for home fellowships with my dad, and it's a completely different scenario that people had such an attachment and a possessiveness towards animals that literally animals were placed inside the house. So you will enter through the front door, then you have the front room, kitchen and the bedroom, and then you had a courtyard for people behind. But before reaching the courtyard, between the house and the courtyard is the cowshed, where all the animals are placed. That you pass this place where animals are kept to enter into the courtyard. Generally, all the home fellowship meetings are happening in the courtyard. So you have to get into the house, walk through the places where animals are placed, and then get into the courtyard. It was never a pleasant experience. Sometimes when you walk through that place, you will be showered all over. And you will hear all those thop, 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 thop noises all over. And when the meeting begins, no musical instruments, but the musical instruments will happen from the cowshed. Now all those sounds and everything, ma's and the moo's and the poo's and everything. Oh, it was horrible. The same horribleness is the evidence of the aliveness, the livelihoodness of those animals. The family is anticipating a harvest because they are there. You cannot have a cowshed and say, I want the manger to be clean. Kill the cow. Kill the ox. You don't. Where there are no oxen, the manger is clean. But the abundance of the harvest comes through the strength of the oxen. If you want that abundance, better clean the manger, clean the poo, survive the stench and the smell. The blessing of crops comes through cleaning the mess in the manger every day. You cannot have a sparklingly clean cowshed. If there are oxen, they make the place a mess every day. You need to clean the manger, clean the ox, bear the smell, because the oxen are the blessing. We want marriage, but not the challenges that comes with the marriage. We want children, but they should never interfere with my schedules. We want a salary, but not the demands of the job. We want a good position in life, but not the preparation for exams. We want a church, but a clean and a perfect church. Simply isn't there. It simply isn't there. We pay attention to the mess and miss the blessings because the blessings are placed by God in the context of the mess around us. The mess means you have an ox. The loads of laundry means you have clothes. The dirty dishes in the kitchen means you have food on the table. The stench of the dirty diapers means you have the blessing of children. The slow-moving traffic means you have the blessing of a functioning city. The stress of work means you have a job to earn your living. And the friction in relationships means you are not isolated, you have people around you. The clutter means that life is happening all around you. The messes around us are often the context in which God places the blessings. And we keep missing them. We join hands with HAMAN and say, come, let's count the one thing we don't have. While missing everything else. It is easy to go on counting what we wish to have, what we don't have. And in that process, we become ungrateful for what we do have. The one yet sent HAMAN to the gallows that he himself made. But the beauty of the Bible is this. Centuries later, another man will kneel down and he will use the same three-letter word, yet. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he would say, yet not my will, let your will be done. It's the same yet that ruined HAMAN's life. In the Garden of Gethsemane, saved your life and my life. He did not kneel down and say, yet all these things doesn't matter, Father, as long as you send me to the cross. He said, yet not my will, but let your will be done. HAMAN rebelled and perished. Jesus surrendered and lived. That's the beauty. HAMAN rebelled and perished. Jesus, with the same yet, surrendered and lived. Not only he, along with him, you and I. Let us not forget history's greatest blessing was placed by God in the mess called the cross of Calvary. That's where he placed it. History's greatest blessing was placed intentionally by God in the mess called cross of Calvary. But he said, yet not my will, let your will be done. He surrendered. He counted the immense blessing the Father has placed in his hands. That through the cross, through that mess, he knew a Simeon will be saved one day. And he said, let not my will, let your will be done. What is that one yet that is bothering you? What is that one yet that is making you so unhappy in your marriage, in your job, in your church, in your home? I really don't know whether God will remove that yet or not. But God is certainly calling you to surrender to Him as you hold on to the yet. But do not allow that yet to push you into bitterness and anger and plotting your own ways to win the game. Haman's story may begin on a winning note, but if God is not for him, he shall not win. That's what it is. His story may start on a winning note, but if God is not for him, he will not win. If God can be for us, who can be against us? If gate is all God has ordained for you, will you sit there at the gate until the Lord takes you from there? Will you say, Lord, I will sit there here at the gate until you pick me from there? Will you also say, yet not my will, let your will be done? Maybe go home, not counting the one thing you don't have, but counting the many, many, many things that you do have. You do have so many. Don't miss. Don't miss. Shall we pray? Father, a story that began on a winning note almost gave us an impression that he shall never fail. Sadly end up where the character was buried. All the fury and the hurry and the worry in between has helped him in no way. All the blessings were wiped off with that one yet, that one thing he craved, he never had. Everything else was wiped off. Help us, Lord, to humbly acknowledge the spirit of Haman is not dead. It is still alive. It is alive at times through our lives, our attitudes. Help us, O Father, not to ruin the blessings with our yet, but to win the blessings of God just as Jesus did by saying, yet not my will, let your will be done. And then to ascend to Mount Calvary, to lay his own life. What a mess for the world. The greatest blessings emerged from there. Under this roof are the witnesses of that. Lord, help us to sit patiently at the gate where you place us. Help us not to be disappointed by a world that is unfair often. Help us not to fight our way as the world fights. Help us to stay there at the gate until the Lord's work. If God is for us, who can be against us? In the midst of all the messes that we go through in life, help us not to miss, Lord, the many blessings that you have given us. Help us to pause, to stand for a minute, to count the blessings that we don't deserve and to be grateful for that. Help us to leave the hall this day, counting the many blessings, joyfully thanking God for the many blessings that you have intentionally placed in the midst of the so many messes in our lives. Help us to see through, to thank you. Send us, Lord, from this church with a note of gratefulness, joyfulness, a trust in God's providence and sovereignty, the courage to sit at the gates that you have ordained for us in lives. Help us, we ask, in Jesus' name. Amen.